Welcome to Sunday and welcome to Moral Side of the News. We're glad you're alongside again this week. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. With me, as always, is a distinguished panel: Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, Centenary United Methodist Church, New Albany; Dr. Kilen Gray, Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary; Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School; and Father Bill Hammer, St. Margaret Mary and St. William Catholic Churches. We begin with the devastating earthquake in Turkey and Syria, with the death toll soaring past 16,000. Amid the horrific destruction, there are moments of joy when a survivor is rescued from the debris. So we turn to our panel and panelists. There are no words for this sort of event.
But there's irony, and the irony is it takes a natural catastrophe like this for people from all countries and all backgrounds and all political persuasions to work together. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we lived in a world where working together was simply the way we do business day after day after day?
Yes, indeed. It's a tragedy of unspoken proportions. And I definitely agree with Stan that it is an amazing thing that we come together as human beings when we find powerful motivation that connects us to our common humanity. And the challenge is that we can't seem to do that. Our different ideologies and political persuasions get into the way. Our commitments, philosophical commitments, social commitments tends to get out of the way. And it seems that when a disaster like this earthquake and floods and other global pandemic and other developments hit any space, we find our common humanity. That seems that none of the other things that we tend to fight about or want to destroy each other over matters not. And I concur, we have to find a way to make that the way that we live every day. It's part of our faith traditions, all of our faith traditions.
And yet it seems to be the hardest lesson we continue to learn, because we've had 3 years of global pandemic where we rose to the occasion and did our best to help neighbors next door as well around the world amid floods and other earthquakes and hurricanes and fires. And yet we still haven't learned the lesson. So maybe Mother Nature, maybe the universe is continuing to put us in the classroom to remind us of our connectedness to one another.
Yeah, I would hope and pray that if we could step back, all of us collectively, and reflect on our own personal lives and how oftentimes a tragedy makes a major difference in the way we then conduct ourselves. If somebody goes through a major illness and comes out of that in recovery, they approach life very differently. And so again, I think all these individual lives hopefully will be impacted by what they see. Now, trying to translate that from all these collective individuals into more of a collective effort, on a national level, going forward. That seems to me where we oftentimes fail to make that next, to me, seemingly logical step. We all of us can do it on an individual basis in our families. As I've mentioned in different contexts, I'm a cancer survivor, and I've often said that I'm a better priest because of my having experience of cancer. It made me a better priest. I could have learned those lessons without getting cancer. That's not the only way to do it. Similarly, how we can get together along better as nations, how we can get better along individually, how we can relief agencies work better together. It shouldn't take a tragedy to learn how to do that. If a tragedy lets us do that, then there's so much to give thanks for, even given all the tragic level that we're talking about, such astronomical numbers.
The assistance that is being sent to Syria and Turkey are primarily for those who have been skilled and designed and trained to do that all over the world. So all of the different nations are sending rescue teams who that's their job, that's their work. Secondarily, you have people that are giving, who don't have that level of skill, but they're sending funds or other types of ways with just writing or posting, expressing human connection with that, because there's an identity. We identify that, but by the grace of God, that may be us. There are various segments of our community that live a daily earthquake. I mean, you're not trying to be facetious about it, neither am I trying to do hyperbole. But there are many people within our communities, various different faith communities, different religious communities, different racial communities, who experience life in that way. And because the majority of people or many other people don't share those experiences, their lives and their stories are seen to be facetious. They're seen to be a little bit too over exaggeration about their pain and their suffering and their anguish. And we have a hard time connecting with the humanity of human suffering. We put degrees on it. We put levels of appreciation on it. And that's what contributes to when suffering takes place. I'm just thinking about my hometown, Memphis. I'm thinking about Tyree Nichols and his family. And those of us who were raised in Memphis, who understand what it's like to be Tyree and how that's a real daily fear among a lot of people. But so many other people have no connection with that because they haven't any experience with that. And so it's hard for many people to really put a human connection on that type of suffering, which is experienced on a daily. And we don't even have the time for poverty. The conversation about that. But our faith traditions teach us that the way that we go there by volition, we don't, as you said, Father Bill, it's not having to go through what a person has to go through to be able to connect and be motivated for love action. But that our faith tradition, all of our faith tradition teaches us to make the volitional act to connect in human suffering, that whether we're suffering or not, or whether we can relate to that experience or not, we are to see other people as ourselves. And if we can find ways to do that, we just may move the needle toward these other types of disasters that are not as readily identified with natural disasters.
Thank you, panel. We're off to...
You have said it better, Kilen. Absolutely right.
On Moral Side of the News, we'll move on to our second topic right now, turning to politics. Two topics. The downing of what is largely assumed to be a Chinese spy balloon has heightened tensions between the U.S. and China, and tension ran high this week during President Biden's State of the Union address. Republicans heckled the president, and their rebuttal address focused on Democratic failures. So turning to our panel, how do you weigh in on the latest political climate?
There are nuances here. Right before the program, I was reading the Wednesday edition of the New York Times, and there is a bill before the Texas legislature now that Governor Abbott has said that if it comes to across his desk, he will sign it quickly and unequivocally. And that bill says that it will be illegal to sell real estate to someone who has Chinese citizenship if they want to purchase real estate in the Republic of Texas. This is going back well over a century ago to those terrible, terrible Asian exclusion laws. And the end of that situation was putting Japanese folks, both citizens and non-citizens, behind barbed wire during World War II, and we can't go there anymore, ever again.
you certainly shouldn't go there. But our current politics is, our current political environment shows symbols of a significant number of Americans that want to. Similar to the story that you read, Stan, is the report of law that's being passed in Mississippi to create an all-white political district within the city of Jackson. And it's being passed by the supermajority, Republican majority in the state of Mississippi. And there seems to be no resistance beyond the African-American citizens there that's really speaking against that, and the representatives that represent them, including the mayor of Jackson. But the logic behind the law there is that the citizens of Jackson wants to be more safe. And so they're creating this separate Pretoria type district. And there doesn't seem to be any political energy to counter that. It's right now being suggested. No votes have been taken, but news outlets are reporting that already. This is just a continuation of various different other types of statewide, local ordinance laws that are being proposed to return the country back, stand to a place we cannot afford to go. We should not afford to go, but there's a lot of energy, as was represented during the State of the Union. There's a lot of energy toward returning back to those dark and ugly days.
To me, it seems almost a little bit of the chicken and the egg, and how do you resolve that argument? What starts it all? But that I know I read it. I thought somewhere a commentary that the last time that there was, or I should say not the last time, but it was the last time. But I thought it was the first time that they documented any verbal kind of heckling in the State of the Union goes back to President Obama. When he was president, that's the first time it kind of took on that nature. But as you see it progressing in so many different aspects of government, and whether it's state level, local level, national level, international level, it's like, is it the politicians feeding off constituents, or the constituents feeding off the politicians? I mean, it's yes. It's both and, rather than either or chicken and egg. I mean, but you see this happening, and then the pride. I disrupted that, or I did that. I got that, and I'm proud of it. Rather than saying, look, I need to acknowledge that yes, I disagree, but I need to respect that this is another human being. Again, I may disagree with some of the politics of the Syrian government, but I'm going to respect the people there that in need. I may disagree with some of the politics of Turkey, but I need to respect the people there. Being able to disagree, but the loss of civility. And again, who's feeding what and to do which, and trying to outdo the other. And it is on both sides in that sense. It's who can outdo the other.
The tapestry thread from that first story, as you were alluding to, Father Bill, that there is this need for us to recognize our common humanity, and there is a hesitancy to do that even after we have come so far to recognize the beauty and individuality and the power of being community together. And it's enough to make me want to live under a rock. But what encourages me is our faith traditions that remind us that there is a better way, and that can teach that, and that do teach that, and that springs forth some hope into this chaotic time. It's unbelievable.
I think it's exemplary to me, and this is just my personal assessment, how President Biden handled that. That he didn't work to try to snuff it out, but he engaged it. I mean, it was a model of how we do conflict, that we don't run from conflict. We don't minimize the voice of persons who disagree with us, even vehemently disagree with us, but we engage it. Now, the ones that he engaged did not want to engage, but that didn't determine how his response would be. He continued to engage. And in fact, he lured them unexpectedly to them toward agreeing that they would keep Social Security and the entitlements and take it off the board of any type of debt ceiling negotiations, which was shrewd as all get out. But I think that for me as a person that deals with domestic violence and trying to help couples handle strong emotion, maybe not the best example, but that was a good example for the nation of allowing persons who disagree with us to disagree and even heatedly disagree, but still maintaining composure enough to continue to engage, because there is no resolution when people go into their silos and there's no longer any communication across the divide.
I'd like to hear your opinion on the Chinese balloon, whether it was an act of aggression or simply a weather balloon that came through U.S. airspace.
Well, based on what
Sadly, I think it was an act of aggression.
I was going to say, based on what I have read, and again, I'm
please.
getting filtered news as well, but it seems almost preposterous to me that it was just some kind of a little weather balloon that got off course. I do understand weather balloons can get off course. I do understand that happens. American balloons do that too. We send them up all the time trying to gauge weather. They can get off course, but you get that far off course of that size, if you're trying to monitor the weather in China, the weather in China, again, are generally, the weather comes from the West. It rarely comes from the East. So to be worried about what's going on in the United States weather, to tell me what's going to go in China's weather, they should be flying the weather balloons over Russia. That would make much more sense. And see how that would be received.
Significant to me was, as far as I've heard, or as far as that has been reported, there was no prior warning of this meteorological balloon. And that's the usual protocol. If there's going to be some crossings into spaces that could be contentious, there's warnings ahead of time. That has been done countless times. For what we heard from what has been reported, none of that took place. And then after the big, huge 15 football field size balloon is seen, then all of a sudden the explanation is, oops, it went off course. I think we did the right thing.
What I found alarming is that there were other balloons missed, and that there's one coming up from South America now. That seems like a lot of weather balloons that have flown off course, and I guess ultimately it's disappointing that the relations between China and the U.S. continue to be. I'm not really sure what the word is. We certainly, depend on China for a lot of stuff, but at the same time, it's not a good relationship. And so it's kind of nervous making. Does it make sense?
I heard House Speaker McCarthy say
It's contentious.
Go ahead, Stan.
That's a good word, Stan.
It's a contentious relationship.
I heard House Speaker McCarthy say this: we, the United States, we think about 3 months down the road. China thinks about 1,000 years down the road in the way they're planning and what they're doing. How do you feel about that?
I think that's perception is in the eye of the beholder. It's a reflection of our political cycles. It's a reflection of the fact that we can change leaders, national leaders, every 4 years, if that's the case, or every 8 years. It's a reflection of the fact that China has given Xi permanent leadership, unfettered opposition, and it's, what McCarthy has said is as if we can compare our two countries and our two governments and our cultures as if it's apples and apples comparison. We're a democracy. They are not. And the view, if it is 1,000-year view, is a view that is within the context of something that is not our context. And so I don't hold any enlightened revelation from that statement.
For me, it's maybe a question of perspective. I might use some different language, that we typically, and this is a good example, are more reactive, whereas the Chinese and Chinese culture are more proactive in the sense that, they look down the road, let's see how many balloons can we get by first, and then see how many things this will open up us to. And then all of a sudden we're reacting now to something that's been going on for quite some time, apparently. I mean, as news reports are coming out. So that's sort of a sense that we're always seeing what's going on, but then we're reacting, and rather than being intentional about starting the process forward.
All right, panel. We're going to move on to our third topic on moral side of the news. We've got about 8 minutes left. Kentucky's teacher shortage is at a crisis level now after years of warning bells and months of heightened pressure from educators and school districts. The shortage is front and center in the state legislative session this year. Panelists, what do you think is the answer to the teacher shortage? Big question.
Teachers and educators should be prioritized in the state budget. Full stop, no exceptions. That every person in the Commonwealth, if you have any level of education, you've been benefited by a teacher, by an educator. And the fact that there is a teacher shortage is exemplary of, or is indicative of, various things. It's not simple solutions in life. There's various different things that contribute to that. But for me, the primary thing, among other reasons, is that our Commonwealth does not place as a high priority, not just education, but educators. And so I fully support any legislation that will ensure that not only teachers are paid commensurately for what they go through. I mean, I think that teachers should even get hazardous pay, but I think that there needs to be a higher lift of education as a whole in our Commonwealth and make it as high a priority as security, as any other thing that is that tends to get most of the tax dollar support and lift. We do not prioritize education, public education, may I say. We don't value that as high as other causes.
Well, I think also there's been a cultural change in valuing, or in professions that tend to inspire people. That first responders used to be in a position that people highly valued and motivated. That would inspire people. I think the same is true with teachers as well. There was a time when that was viewed as a very inspiring profession. And I'm not sure some people coming up today see that way also. It is. Like you say, we've all benefited from it, but looking at some of the discussions going on about what's the value of a college education anymore? What's that value? Is that worth the investment? So, college professors, what are their value anymore? It's just a lot of this is being called into question. And I think that's also a reflective of it. And are people inspired enough to make sometimes a sacrifice to get into the profession and then to work with it, that kind of. So I think that's just another complicating factor.
I also think it would benefit like teachers. Go ahead, Stan.
No, Harriett, please. Please finish.
A very quick comment about. I would really like to see at some point in our history where government steps back to see all of the rules and regulations they've placed on teachers when they have no teaching experience or classroom experience, and have continued to elongate a teacher's job description where that teacher can no longer do the very basics of what they feel passionate about, which is giving students knowledge and inspiring thinking and seeing students really grow. I hope that at some point in the near future, that's part of the review.
I see a tragedy here. And the tragedy is with this shortage of teachers here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky and other places, the bar is being lowered precipitously so that people without any training or any experience or even the commensurate education are being brought into classrooms to educate our children. What we need to do is to make the path to people who wish to be elementary, middle, and high school teachers an easy path, and a path where they're not going to be saddled by debt once they get into the classroom, and to bring them into the classroom. What the state of Florida tried to do with military veterans on its face sounded pretty good, but it proved to be an unreachable goal and an abysmal failure. And likewise, the idea of bringing teachers into Kentucky classrooms without any higher education, it's an insult to the families of our state.
Okay, panel, we're at the end of our program. About a minute left. It's Super Bowl weekend. This Sunday, the Kansas City Chiefs and Philadelphia Eagles square off in Super Bowl 57. Simple question. Who are you rooting for, or are you just going to watch commercials? What are you going to do? Who'd like to start? Got a minute left.
I'm rooting for football.
Yeah. I would say go Packers.
Go Steelers for me. Yes.
I would have said go Chiefs, having lived in Kansas, but after a recent game, I'm not feeling it. So whoever wins fairly, yay them.
Stan, how about you?
I was hoping to say go Bengals.
Yes.
I was hoping to say go Bengals.
I have both Philadelphia and Kansas City fans in my family, so this will be a fun weekend.
Yes.
Well, best of luck to both teams. Best of luck to you as well. Thanks for joining us on this edition of Moral Side of the News. Harriett Akins-Banman, Kilen Gray, Stan Miles, and Bill Hammer. Join us again next week as the conversations continue on Moral Side of the News. Thank you, panel.